It is very fragile peace because peace can bring, the power can bring a truce, but does not make peace actually.
And Donald Trump, if always acts in his own interests, in the interests of his kind of family and his financial interests and organizational interests.
There are a lot of divisions within the Israeli society about this continuation of the war without no end in sight for the last 2 years.
More than $500 billion loss for Israel's economy and the war.
Benjamin Netanyahu said this explicitly. This is part of why he was facilitating the delivery of bags of cash to Hamas in Gaza from the Qatari government.
The Americans are still the external players in West Asia or in the Middle East.
Hamas and Gaza, is this the end game? Or have the guns fallen silent just for now? Is Hamas preparing to reinvent itself as a resistance movement, a more acceptable nomenclature than a terror group? So far, it has shown no signs of demilitarization or de-weaponization. Instead, there are videos of Hamas executing Gazans who challenge their authority as it returns to take control of the streets. There's talk of how it will challenge an aging Mahmoud Abbas and a Palestinian authority that is crying out for new leadership. And what about Israel, which granted had little choice but to retaliate for the October 7th attack? But over the course of the last 2 years, there's been a growing majority within Israel who do not want to see a return to war. And there are questions now over accountability. Who will be held responsible for the 65,000 dead and the 170,000 injured? Will it be Hamas? Will it be Israel? And of course, the biggest takeaway at the gathering at Sharm el-Sheikh was US President Donald Trump, who addressed the Knesset before that, demonstrating how at the snap of his fingers, leaders from across the Arab and Muslim world, as well as Europe and Africa, arrived for a summit. Has he actually set in motion a reordering of the Middle East as he claims? Or is this another failed summit like Alaska was with Russian President Vladimir Putin? The two main protagonists in the Gaza war, Israel and Hamas, were unrepresented. At Sharm el-Sheikh, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was uninvited at the very last minute, and Hamas was a no-show. But how many of us know that it was direct face-to-face talks between Hamas leader Khalid al-Hayya, whom the Israelis had tried to assassinate only a week before, and the Israeli chief negotiator, the Qatari, Turkish, and Egyptian intel chiefs, and two key Americans, Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, meeting at the Four Seasons Hotel at Sharm el-Sheikh that led to the peace deal. Trump was kept in the loop. And yet, as the guns go all but silent in Gaza, as Israelis celebrate the return of their loved ones who had been held captive for over 700 days, as Palestinians return to their homes, destroyed in the 2-year onslaught, and the American president takes credit for ending the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza and bringing the hostages home, there are persistent naysayers who say it could all end badly, that all it will take will be one incident for it all to go back to square one. Hello everyone, I'm Neena Gopal. Welcome to Global Express, where we look at the story behind the story. Giving us an insight into these developments are experts on West Asia. Dr. Waeil Awwad is a byword on the region. He's covered South Asia and the Middle East since 1979, well known for his reporting on war zones, particularly war-torn Afghanistan, Sri Lanka. He was captured in an ambush during the American invasion of Iraq in 2003 and lived to tell the tale. Welcome, Dr. Awwad. Good to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having me, Neena.
Also with us is Dr. Alvite Ningthoujam from the Symbiosis School of International Studies, whose special focus is Israel, its foreign policy, and the geopolitics of the Middle East. Welcome, Dr. Ningthoujam. Good to have you back on the show too.
Thank you, Neena, for having me once again.
And Matt Duss, Executive Vice President at the Center for International Policy, formerly a visiting scholar at Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Duss was also foreign policy advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders from the 2017 to 2020. He served as president of the Foundation for the Middle East, Peace and a National Security and International Policy Analyst at the Center for American Progress. Welcome, Matt Duss. So the first question is this, Dr. Awwad. Only days ago, it seemed as if American President Donald Trump had managed to pull off the seemingly impossible. He got Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Hamas leaders to agree to stop fighting, got them to agree to release captives, swap hostages for prisoners, and agree to resume humanitarian aid. Before I go in to ask the big question on why did everyone seem to trust Trump, or how did Trump get everyone to trust him, it now looks as if this is a temporary halt at best. I mean, the threats by Trump threatening Hamas with retaliation if it doesn't disarm seems to have hit the peace deal's first road bump. They don't disarm, we will disarm them. They know I'm not playing games, is what Trump has told reporters. But he didn't say how he was going to take away the weapons. So Hamas has handed over 20 living hostages, Dr. Awwad, and the remains of several others, three others. But even the UN, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and Israel have said that unless all the bodies are handed over, aid would be cut by half. And the UN has already got Israeli approval to move 100,000 tons of food, and medicine and so on into Gaza. But the border crossing into Gaza was closed on Tuesday. And the ceasefire, which went into effect on October 10th, doesn't seem to be holding. People are still being hit. Barely a week, and it looks as if Israel is already testing the Trump brokered ceasefire deal. So, what do you have to say about all of this, Dr. Awad?
Well, I think you have given the right answer in your introductions, and I feel it is very fragile peace because peace can bring the power can bring a truce, but does not make peace actually, and that is what is the all about. What President Trump have achieved is a humanitarian part of the Palestinian crisis. I mean, the Palestinian crisis have a political, humanitarian, historical, ethnical, and religious angle to it. So therefore, at least he succeeded in halting Israeli genocide on the Palestinian, which continued for 2 years and 30 days. So therefore, we did see that much of destruction happening. And in fact, 1 year ago, it was decided the same thing, nothing have changed. That was the same demand, the same terms, and that you stop this war and exchange and given. So, but Netanyahu refused to stop this war on Gaza because they have different objectives. So therefore, we can give it into two parts actually, Neena. Here, one is that President Trump achieved the ceasefire, and the second part is there he spoke in Sharm el Sheikh of a peace, durable peace, Abraham Accord. But here, I think he was speaking of a peace without the Palestinian, because there is no question of a Palestinian state, because none of the Israelis government, especially Prime Minister Netanyahu, is very keen on seeing any livable or durable Palestinian state coexisted with the Israelis. So therefore, Gaza Strip will be partially occupied by Israel for long holds, and the American troops who are monitoring the situation will turn the Palestinian into a game of backgammon from one place to another, the chess game, and then they will see there is not much of a changes on the ground till they expel the Palestinians
Dr.
from
Awad,
Gaza.
Dr. Awad, but why is everyone trusting Trump to do the right thing then? Was it just to placate him because otherwise he'll get mad? I mean, what changed? Because in January, when the first exchange happened, fighting resumed within days.
Absolutely. I think what happened is that he realized, and he said it himself, that Israel cannot fight the world alone. The isolation of the United States and Israel have been very prominent all over the capitals in the world. You have seen the demonstration. You have seen every capitals have seen erupted, and they're asking for ending of this genocide and free Palestine. And that's what happened. He said you cannot fight. Secondly, the economic impact on Israel, actually, the loss on the Israelis leave the Palestinian apart because nothing left of Gaza Strip, but more than $500 billion loss for Israelis economy on the war.
That's very interesting.
That is
Yes.
$580 billion, as according to some sources that Israeli economy have lost. So how they can compensate with the continue of a war where you will not achieve anything? What did Netanyahu actually achieve, by the way? I mean, if you go by his own terminology, he was saying he wanted to end the war, finish Hamas, dismantle Hamas, and also take the whole of Gaza Strip. And here we are. He did not achieve anything. It just the continuity of the war maintained him in the political career as a Prime Minister of Israel before he has to be taken into a trial for a crime he committed, for corruption he has done inside Israel, and I think for the money he siphoned out of Qatar, which used to be sent through him to Hamas, around $50 million he had made his pocket fat out of this money.
That's very interesting. Professor Nintujam, if I could bring you in, why do you think Israel agreed? Because, I mean, Israel was coaxed into giving this deal by Witkoff and Kushner, and handing back the hostages. But it was also, I mean, I see, the role played by Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey, who've stood as guarantors. Do you think that is what persuaded Hamas also to agree to this deal?
Thank you, Neena, once again for having me on this show. And good evening to Waeil Awwad, sir. Good to see you back in the screen again.
Pleasure is mine.
Yeah, Neena, the coming to your question with regard to the Israel's option, I think it has come under some sort of a predicament. Particularly uh, looking at the way how certain things are shaping up economically within the country, and at the same time, the society has gotten a lot of, there are lots of divisions within the Israeli society about this continuation of the war without no end in sight for the last 2 years. And very importantly, it also, I think, has got to do with the international pressure, whether they accept it or not openly. We have seen a lot of pushbacks coming from some of the strong allies from Europe as well as from the Indo-Pacific regions of
That's
the
right.
world. So that again, to my assessment, would have played a major role in allowing Israel to come up with some sort of a flexibility and accept the peace plan. So 2 years into this conflict, Israel, I think, has its own goals. That is, want to defeat Hamas militarily and politically, and at the same time, it also has a very strong goal of releasing all the hostages. I think Israel might have come under the impression that these two targets or these two goals could not be achieved at the same time. So again, that's when it has realized the importance of talking to the U.S. administration and and also with the other regional players that have played an important role in this ceasefire. So that could have been those predicament.
I mean, they've handed over 20 hostages, but there are apparently another 28 bodies of the Israelis, dead hostages, that cannot be recovered as quickly, and apparently that is a kind of a bugbear between Israel and Hamas at the current moment, because I mean there are hundreds of unexploded bombs lying in this rubble and debris. So I mean for anybody to go and hunt for bodies, and Palestinians saying there are hundreds under the debris. So under whose supervision will this combing operation be done?
Yeah, that is something which we would need to see whether we will have any international institutions or international forces coming into the picture because of the easing of, the so-called tensions in the region. But it remains to be seen how will they be able to retrieve those bodies which are lying under the debris inside Gaza Strip. So those are some of the, I would say, factors that have determined Israel to agree to some sort of an agreement with the Hamas after these 2 years of conflict, having no end in sight.
The other aspect of this whole thing with that peace agreement that was signed in Sharm el Sheikh by Trump and the major Arab and Muslim leaders is the absence of the physical presence of Israel or Hamas representatives. So it's an agreement that is making promises on their behalf. Don't you think so, Dr. Awwad? I mean, how are Arab leaders in the major Gulf countries and Europe's big guns who signed on going to ensure that Hamas and Israel keep to their word? Because Trump's remarks, I think, border on altruism. You know, uh, it doesn't really seem as if he can arm twist Israel beyond a certain point. And who is going to pressure Hamas if it doesn't play by the rules?
Well, look, what President Trump think of himself, and he said he's a deal maker. He didn't say he's a peacemaker, and a durable peace does not come by force. Let us put it right. I mean, you are talking of Abraham Accord. You're talking of Israel, a permanent, the and eternal capital of Jerusalem. You're talking of so many things about Israel in his speech, but he never mentioned a word of the genocide against the Palestinian. The death number of more than 67,850 Palestinians being killed, 158,000 have been injured, more than 10,000 still are missing under the debris. And imagine a president of the United States ignoring the UN Security Council resolution in terms of also the implementing of the two-state solution. Nothing he spoke. He just spoke of an American project. He wanted to reshape the Middle East map. He wanted to make sure that Israel have the dominance. The problem where people don't really follow more, Nina, is that Israel does not want it to be integrated into the Middle East. Israel wanted to remain a dominant power, politically, economically, and militarily. And that gives you the indication that Israel have been created for these things. It's not been created that they can coexist among nations. Otherwise, why they are occupying part of Lebanon? Why they are occupying part of Syria? Why they have taken more than 650 square kilometers of Syria? Why they are threatening now Lebanon and Iraq and Iran and Houthis? It is because there is some people within the religious parties who are coalition with Netanyahu, who is speaking openly now of a greater Israel. And that is where the American president lack history, lack knowledge of history. He does not, he have a political insomnia. He doesn't understand anything in terms of political American position over the years of blocking all the vetoes, all the UN Security Council resolution when it comes to Israel. But he is ready to speak, that he is able to bring the two parties together, and he is making a parading all these leaders behind him, look like a school teacher. And all of these things have been done in front of the cameras just for the show that he is able to bring people within 20 minutes to sit down across the table. Israel does not need to be present on the table because he is speaking on behalf of Israel. But
Yeah,
Palestinian, ignoring the Palestinian, that is the issue here. Hamas is not the Palestine. Hamas is a faction of Palestinian people. Palestinian authority is there. The Palestinian people are there. They needed some real representative for them to decide. So there is a lots of vacuum and vague ambiguities about his project. What is it seriously? He's saying permanent peace, permanent ceasefire. Is it really going to be implemented? And are we going to see such a kind of a durable peace? If such things, then well, fair enough, we are welcome. But do they going to give, as I said, the two-state solution? I don't think it is just simply killing the Palestinian case, and there is no question of Palestinian state. Now, because what next? What is after Gaza? After
yeah,
Gaza is
that's very good
immediately
point.
in the West Bank, which they are going to either partially or fully annexed by Israel, which considered part of a greater Israel. So where do we stand now? What do you want to do with 5.5 million Palestinians living inside Israel, or inside Palestinian territories, where only 5.5% of the total territory left for the Palestinians?
But Professor Ningthoujam, why is it then that Egypt has signed on to this game, and Turkey, and all these the biggies? I mean, they were the co-guarantors, so to speak. Egypt and Turkey and Qatar.
I think that's again a very interesting, you know, development which we saw just a couple of days ago with regard to the summit in Sharm el Sheikh. Uh, see, everybody wants to secure their positions, particularly when it comes to their partnerships with the United States and also their standing in the region. So again, if we look at the summit, no, we don't have a clarity of what's going and who's going to do what, and what kind of future course of actions do we expect. So if you look at in the recent times, Turkey is also one country that has an ambition to be a leader in the Islamic world, particularly in the Middle East. Again, that was curtailed. The ambition was curtailed by its economic and other internal problems in the last few years. As a result, that has led to some sort of an understanding with the Emiratis and the Saudis in the recent times. The same thing is with the Egyptians. They also have a major issue along the border areas in the Sinai, and they would not want to, welcome more and more, refugees or on its territory.
That's right.
because of its own
That's right.
security concerns. So somewhere down the line, the word that you use, placate the Americans, and this also shows that the Americans are still the most sought after, external players in West Asia or in the Middle East. So everybody would want to have that buy. Everybody want to have that sort of a security umbrella or economic benefits of remaining close to the Americans. So
Yeah.
it's going to be difficult for me to assess at this moment what would these countries gain out of this, but I would say it's largely to do with their strategic and national interests.
This whole issue of Hamas disarming that we've talked about, that was supposed to have happened, they've already said no, that they're not going to disarm. And Trump has warned of these consequences if they don't. So, and Hamas is also showing itself as the savior that forced Israel to accept their demands. Forced the reopening of the Rafah crossing, which of course is closed again, to let food and aid in, release prisoners. So, will Hamas seek a bigger role, just as the Houthis have done in Yemen, uh, Dr. Awad?
Well, I think the sidelining Jordan, sidelining Syria, sidelining Palestinian, and nothing to be commitment from Israel, and Turkey wanted to play the Muslim Brotherhood card. It's a clear indication that the failure of the right wing of the Muslim Brotherhood organization, Hamas, in bringing the objective of a Palestinian state, need to do an introspective and leave the geopolitical changes, take it in consideration to deal with the new changes in the region. And I think Israel at the moment have changed its doctrine as well. You have noticed that Israel is having a long arms to attack any country in the region, even if they are American allies. So therefore, I think the dominance of the American power would be hissed on of Israel doing the same thing for the United States makes every country in the region vulnerable and make this peace plan nothing but a piece of paper where the American president is trying to rechange or reshaping the Middle East map. If this peace deal really stand strong and still hold on, then we may think that President Trump have something else in his mind. But I believe, and I am doubtful because we live in an area of that turmoil region, and the conspiracy theory is very much floating in that region. Though I don't believe in it, but we understand that neither they know that elderly will die and youngers will forget. But in the Palestinian case, it is the youngers who will tell the next generation what happened to their families, what happened to their parents, and they will fight again. So I think perpetual provocation for permanent wars is what the objective is in the region. And
That's very interesting. Matt does why everyone believes that they can trust Trump to deliver on this peace plan. I mean, was it just to placate him, or does he actually have something cooking which will, come to fruition in the next couple of weeks and months?
Well, I think the way to understand it, and thank you for inviting me to be here. I think the way to understand it is that you can't trust Donald Trump, but you can trust Donald Trump to be Donald Trump. And Donald Trump if always acts in his own interests, in the interests of his kind of family and his financial interests and organizational interests. But also just he is very interested, as you may have noticed, in proclaiming his own greatness and his own ability to do things that no one else can do. And of course, that's what he's very much been doing with this ceasefire agreement. No one has ever made such a beautiful peace like I've just made in the Middle East. Everyone is amazed by it. So the question is, will he remain personally invested as part of his understanding of his own legacy as a peacemaker in the region? Whatever criticisms one has of the actual details of the agreement, and I certainly have lots of them. But the question is, and I think this is what those who have signed on in the region are thinking about, is keeping Donald Trump invested personally and understanding that if this peace deal falls apart, then he will look bad.
Now that's very interesting because also you can sense this great unease after this, in the day afters. Within Gaza, there are graphic videos of Hamas militia lining up those who have taken control of Gaza. These are as my old Egyptian colleague of mine told me, these are old families, that Gaza is still tribal. she said old families pose a challenge to Hamas, which when it had melted away, and now that the Gazans are accused of colluding with Israel. So this is the kind of thing which you never hear about. I mean, outsiders like me didn't know that there were tribal elders and militias who don't support Hamas, particularly younger members. So, what is this whole new challenge? How are the Palestinians going to deal with this? Because there's also an expose in one media outlet that said that there was a collusion of groups within Gaza and senior members of the Egyptian government arranging for Gazans to leave through the Sinai Peninsula for a fee of $5,000 per head.
Right. No, that's true. I mean, there are, officials with close connections to the Egyptian government who are making enormous sums of money exploiting the suffering and the frantic need to escape on the part of Gazans who could afford it, which is not very many. But yes, the problem of security within Gaza and who will govern it, and the kind of competing factions, Hamas, other militias, other organizations like a Palestinian Islamic Jihad and others, and family and tribal groups. I mean, these different layers of these different relationships and networks exist, elsewhere in the region and frankly elsewhere in the world. We call them by different names. But the challenge, and this is a challenge that predates October 7, is that it has been part of Israel's policy to keep the Palestinians divided. We know this Benjamin Netanyahu said this explicitly. This is part of why he was facilitating the delivery of bags of cash to Hamas in Gaza from the Qatari government to sustain Hamas as the rulers of Gaza. Bezalel Smotrich, the very right-wing minister in the government who opposes a Palestinian state, supports continued settlement and control of all of the Palestinian occupied territory, has called before October 7th said that Hamas is an asset. The Palestinian Authority is the threat. Why? Because the Palestinian Authority represented, the prospect of a Palestinian state alongside Israel, and that is something that the Israeli right wing opposes. So again, this is obviously the Palestinian leadership has bears some of the blame here, but I think what we need to understand is if we are going to have a real and enduring peace, security for Palestinians and Israelis, that will require allowing, supporting, or at least getting out of the way of the Palestinians to kind of reconstitute a Palestinian national voice, a Palestinian national movement, and a government by, for, and of Palestinians in all of the territory of the state of Palestine. That includes Gaza, East Jerusalem, the West Bank. And so I think moving as fast as possible, and again, this is something that Netanyahu opposes, something that Trump does not seem to understand. There was a possibility of empowering a Palestinian leadership in Gaza. There still is. I think that's something that we should be talking about much, much more. Because as you noted, as we've seen, Hamas is very much still present in Gaza. It is asserting and reasserting its strength to control Gaza. They will not go away, but I do think one way to diminish them and weaken them and ultimately make them irrelevant is to offer a better diplomatic path for liberation and end to occupation. That is part of what has sustained Hamas all these years, the fact that diplomacy and nonviolence has not worked to end the occupation. And I think if we can show that there is a political horizon here that doesn't require constant violence, that would empower kind of nonviolent leaders.
Neena, if I could just add,
Yes, please,
could just add to what Mr. Matt just mentioned about the objective of Hamas. I don't think it is. I think it's premature to write off Hamas, survival in Gaza Strip. We have seen this for far too long. That after having spent all their efforts, energy, investments since the first Intifada, I don't think they are in the mood to give up the fight that easily. So you yourself have indicated some of the steps that they have taken in the last few days, even after the ceasefire was announced. To me, those videos and those posts that we have seen of execution in the public area about the conspirators or the spies, if you may say, is an indication that they are still having that intent to remain resilient in the Strip, and to remain as one of the players or the important players, not that cannot be sidelined when it comes to talking about the Palestinian cause. So I think it's too premature to be sending them off in the attic. The second phase of the plan, I think, will confront a lot of thorny issues, including the disarmament of Hamas and the future of Palestinian governance. So while, of course, it's a big achievement in itself that they have been able to broker this peace between the two sides that has resulted into the release of the hostages and the captives from both sides. I think the second phase would be a major challenge.
So the meeting is going to happen. The conclave is going to happen in November in Egypt again, apparently, when they will discuss the second phase. But will this involve, Arabs and Europeans putting boots on the ground? Because one half is occupied. The Israeli Defense Forces are still in control of one half of Gaza, but the other half, which they have vacated, is obviously going where the Hamas will call the shots. Dr. Awwad, do you think that there should be a Palestinian Authority which reinvents itself? Because we hear that Marwan Barghouti continues to be incarcerated. That there are moves to induct Nasser al-Qidwa as a more acceptable face. Is that something which will the Palestinian Authority and Fatah win back the trust of the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza? Because they were seen, or they were tainted, we don't know, fairly or unfairly, as corrupt and ineffective. So what do you see happening?
Well, I think the Palestinian Peak Authority is to blame first. What's happening, the mess created inside Gaza, inside the Palestinian Authority, even Yasser Arafat, when he went for the Oslo Agreement. And the Oslo Agreement, as you know, it was written that 5 years interim period for a viable Palestinian state, but it never been on the card for any Israeli leader, especially Prime Minister Netanyahu, that he wanted to see any viable Palestinian state. Leave aside the Palestinian Authority, how did Yasser Arafat was poisoned, and how did Mahmoud Abbas come
Yeah.
to power, and how he remained in power despite the fact that he's not even elected and continue to be in power. So therefore, Hamas was created, and Matt was rightly saying, by the siphoning all this money, because one condition was given, that there should be no compromise or reconciliation between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. Therefore, they kept them apart, and when they used Hamas at one side, they tried to finish them in Gaza Strip, and they used the Palestinian Authority after Oslo Agreement to get normalizing of relation with all the country, including India, by the way. And then they
Yes.
continue to penetrate into the Arab capital, Israel, and without even speaking of a Palestinian state. So therefore, if we look at the Palestinian state currently at the moment, from the Israeli point of view, it is impossible, because the Israeli mood and the right wing is overwhelming, taking in the public opinion. There is no question of a Palestinian state. So I think what the Palestinian required now is setting their house in order. And setting their house in order is very much important, bringing all the leaders, even the Hamas, even the Palestinian Authority, on the table and finding a solution to face the challenges coming. What is going to come is worse what will happen to Gaza. Watch and see what will happen in the West Bank. Watch and see what will happen to the Palestinian in Gaza Strip. Watch and see when the world will also open their eyes and see truly that, because nobody was believing us when we were saying what happened in Gaza. Nobody was believing all these stories, all the genocide was happening. Now let the camera enter inside and bring to the world how much Israel was destroying and keen on killing all the Palestinians. Even Israeli leader never hidden their aspiration and dreams that they wanted the sea to swallow Gaza Strip. So I think this is the situation where we are going to witness, unfortunately, and I say it unfortunately, the Palestinian Authority bear all the responsibility for bringing the Palestinian case again to the table, or either Mr. Abbas should resign and say, my people under occupation, let the international law take care of my people.
That's very well said, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Professor, tell us what you were
Nina,
going to say something.
yes, this is again very interesting when it comes to the leadership vacuum on the Palestinian side. So we have seen this during the course of the war. The lack of diplomatic efforts throughout the Gaza crisis, in a way, reflects the structural weaknesses and the problems that have become really entrenched within the Palestinian society, particularly looking at the way how PA functions, which also means that there is a fair deal of a requirement for reform and renewal. And this renewal or reformation within the Palestinian Authority I think, can only be given a chance if there is an exit for the current president Mahmoud Abbas, who many have seen as a corrupted leader and very out of touch sort of a person. So a
They
new
say he's practically senile.
Right. So a new Palestinian Authority leadership, to me, would should come with lots of moral clarity and also the urgency to reform this decaying institution. So I think these are few things which are required and the need of the hour. So without a strong Palestinian Authority with a strong leadership, I think Hamas will take all the efforts and will take all the leverage to reassert itself as the player to reckon with, and the international community would have no choice but to engage with Hamas again. So this
That's
is
very interesting. I mean, so the whole idea of a Palestinian statehood looks like a false promise, even though the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution which was backed by 142 nations. But Mr. Pat Duss, if I can come back to you, there's a very interesting story that I read about the backroom negotiations that happened at Sharm el Sheikh the day before the agreement was actually signed. It saw the US attempt, I mean, through Steve Woodcock and Jared Kushner, talk to the Hamas directly,
Mhm. Yeah.
face to face. So it's the last time
Yeah.
in January when the Israeli negotiator was left out of the picture, Adam Boehler, the US negotiator, was shown the door. This time, the Israeli chief negotiator, Nitzan Allen, apparently told the Israel Egyptian intel chief, Hassan Rashad, that Israel was on board. And Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, actually even offered his condolences to Al Haya for losing his son in the Doha attack, which is quite
Mhm.
something. So did
Mhm.
Jared Kushner. So what is this new move that is,
Yeah.
the actual face-to-face talks is almost as if you are then recognizing Hamas
Yeah.
as a power.
No, this goes to the kind of, you know, Donald Trump, just by virtue of his near total control of the Republican Party, operates according to a kind of different political gravity than many other presidents have in the past. Obviously, if the Joe Biden administration, for example, talked directly to Hamas, they would have endured enormous criticism and political fallout. I still think they should have done that. Frankly, I think the United States should have been talking to Hamas for a very, very long time. So I think it's good that the Trump administration was talking directly with Hamas's representatives, but I also think it reflects the fact, one, that Trump has established a level of trust within the Israeli government, that they understand that they are A, not going to be kind of sold out by the Trump administration, but also B, even if they criticized it publicly, it wouldn't matter because Donald Trump will do whatever he wants. So I think, you know, there are sometimes this produces very bad outcomes, this kind of ignoring the rules of and kind of norms of foreign policy. But I think it also shows an ability to think differently, to understand that the old ways of doing things have not delivered good outcomes for the United States or for the region. So I think a lot of people in Washington are watching this and hoping it can kind of portend some more creative thinking in the future by other presidents.
Given the mass genocide in Gaza, one can understand why Erdogan threw a spanner in the works and did not let Netanyahu land at Sharm el Sheikh, for the summit. But is there any point to this new narrative that is also doing the rounds that the Middle East for the Middle East to return to some kind of normalcy, it needs to sort of mend its fences, build bridges with Israel, even though all of the neighbors are virtually at war with Israel. I mean, is this too high a mountain to climb? Is this just it's just talk?
Yeah, I'm very skeptical that normalization, that the Abraham Accords will continue to expand for a few reasons. One is, yes, the outrage among the various publics in the region over the Gaza genocide is extraordinary, and around the world, frankly. Um, so I think, everyone has talked for a long time about Saudi Arabia being the kind of crown jewel of any normalization effort. I think that is simply not in the cards in the short term, perhaps even in the longer term. Now, there will continue to be kind of quiet behind the scenes talks and cooperation with Israel, as there was even before the Abraham Accords. But I'm very skeptical that there will be a lot of public normalization, the way that Donald Trump seems to want to hope. But the other piece of this is, let's understand the logic of the Abraham Accords. Certainly, there were benefits to countries in the region, normalizing their relations with Israel. They got some benefits from that. Mostly those benefits they were getting already privately. But what's important
Basically,
about
these
the
were tourists, but from what I understand, more to
right.
Israeli tourists coming into the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain.
Right. Not which, is fine and good. It's good for people to be able to travel and see different places. But what was the key thing about the Abraham Accords for the region is that this was a pathway to influence in Washington. Making peace, normalizing relations with Israel was a way to greater influence in Washington. And with the Trump administration, it's clear that these countries just don't need that anymore. They understand that you give Donald Trump a new plane, or you invest, $100 million in Jared Kushner's new crypto scheme. There's avenues to Washington that they have discovered that don't require normalizing with Israel. And so the value of the Abraham Accords has diminished considerably.
That's very interesting. Dr. Waeil Awwad, if I can come to you, what about Netanyahu's own future? Because, Trump actually publicly appealed to President Herzog, the Israeli president, to pardon him. And as you rightly brought up, he does have, cases against him. But the right wing within Israel, as we have all heard, are not embracing this peace plan. They've said they will resign if he attends any peace conference. And taking over the West Bank is, as you said, central to the right wing's game plan. So Trump has opposed it, but he can't do anything about it, really, can he? Because Netanyahu, does also back the West Bank occupation.
Well, I
So
think what we have actually, Nina, is very important to notice that there were two plans, actually, not one plan. One was Trump plan, one was amended plan by Netanyahu. The amended plan of Netanyahu speak volumes of no Palestinian state at all. There's only a peace deal, a truce. This is the phase one. Phase two and phase three remains, and Israel will continue to occupy 53% of Gaza. There is no question of any viable Palestinian state anymore. So therefore, this peace talk and Abraham Accord is nothing but an eyewash that the American wanted to make sure that the American president, that he wanted to integrate Israel into the region. Israel does not want it to be integrated. As I said, they wanted to remain as a dominant force, the dominant power, occupying, expanding. Netanyahu's future may sound political career is at risk, no doubt about it. But if we look at the language he is using and the popularity he's gained after implementing the Israelis, what we call the Israelis, the forged Talmud doctrines of the greater Israel, he's thinking that he got the intuition of a divine power to bring back the greater Israel, which extended from Sinai Peninsula to Euphrates, including the Sinai Peninsula, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, one third of Saudi Arabia. And if that is his plan, and popularity is gaining, and he gave the upper hand for Smotrich and also Ben Gvir to expand the settlements inside the West Bank, which is a clear indication they are gaining popularity among the right wing, among the Israeli settlers. So therefore, we are going to face a new phases of Israelis' political scenario and changes, which is going to see more popularity to leaders of the right wing. And Netanyahu, if the cases you cannot tell American president to pardon him. I mean, he crossed all the limit, President Trump, by the way, not only by surpassing the UN Security Council resolution on Palestine, but also by asking to pardon something on a criminal cases. For God's sake,
Yeah.
what sort of a president is? I'm so sorry to say that, but that's give us. We are living in illogically illogic era where we are not able to believe what we are hearing. I mean, this is
Why is
something.
it? Why is it, Dr. Awad, then that Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar, these are powerful countries, and Saudi Arabia and all of these countries have signed on to this Sharm el Sheikh agreement?
That is the agreement only for the truce and the ceasefire. The agreement nothing to do with a permanent solution and a permanent peace and a two-state solution. There is no question about it. Nothing mentioned on this. And these are the broker of the deal with Hamas. So therefore, they are the custodian of the Muslim Brotherhood organization. Straightforward.
Okay, all right. I get that. I get that. But it still fascinates me, Professor Nintujam. If you could just tell us, about the idea behind, bringing all these, major powers. Has Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner actually got a plan in place? Because now they're talking about, I mean, this is the one that has fascinated me the most, because the oddball at Sharm el Sheikh was the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair and his great project that dates back to Donald Trump's first term of office, where, if you remember, Kushner's real estate firm had pushed. I mean, there was a fascinating article that I read about how they had sold 770 plots of land, in Gaza, to various, American Jews and British Jews and so on, and that Hamas has, vacated that area. So, is this development of Gaza into this Riviera still on the cards? And what happens to the millions of Palestinians who live there?
Yeah, I think it's if we look at the larger picture, also mentioned by our other panelists here, we still have a little bit of unclarity of what this peace plan would entail. And while we have witnessed the first phase getting through without much problem, that is the release of the hostages. I think it was. I think it has also a lot to do with the Americans trying to secure or to maintain its position, particularly under the Donald Trump administration in the Middle East or in West Asia. Again, in that it would also mean that business, that you are able to bring stability in the region where you have a major interest for your economic and businesses and trade, and to be able to put both the warring parties at bay for a while would also mean that they have, they would give some leeway to the regional players to be a part of their project. So I think it has got to do a lot with, apart from for now, in principle, that there's a peace or reduction of the tension. But in the long run, if this peace has to hold up in the second phase or in the subsequent phases, it would also give an opportunity for many of these players to do business with Americans. That could be one way of looking at it. So I would keep it at that. And moreover, it's a business for the Americans, particularly under the administration led by Donald Trump.
Now, Israel's major enemy in the region has always been Iran, Dr. Awad. The axis of resistance that Iran used to ring fence Israel. Has that been, clipped? Has Iran's power to, create any damage for Israel been clip? Because the Syrian leader now, Ahmad al-Sharaa, has addressed the UN. These are Israel's proxies, Turkey's proteges, and I saw, the meeting, as we all saw, of Vladimir Putin and Ahmad al-Sharaa. So where does Iran stand in all of this? Because, Chabahar was a key trade route, and now that has got fresh sanctions imposed on it. So the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, have they all been diminished one by one?
I think we are talking now of the wider perspective of the geopolitical changes and the West Asian war. if you wanted to put it on that phrases, if I can say, is because now you're talking of the global trade and oil passage, which can be harmful to all the Asian countries, the giant Asian, where the economy actually is very strong, like India, Japan, China, South Korea, and name it. So those who are depending on 60% of the oil from the region. So when you close the Strait of Hormuz, when you close the Red Sea, when you close the Mediterranean, you are closing the pipelines of all that. You are closing the tap for all the supply to those countries. So the United States and the big power game come to the picture, that this is not only merely a war between Israel and its neighbor, it's a wider war with the United States and Israel taking the lead, and the ailing European are also taking a lead because they have a remnants of power in their mindset that they can be colonizing these areas again. So I think I'm saying this because of two reasons. Because Iran will remain a strong power, a regional power to reckon with, and Israel is postponing its attack on Iran because first they wanted to annihilate the whole of Palestine, take part of Syria, finish the Popular Front of Iraq, and then take on Iran. Houthis are part of the American game plan to
If
start a
I can
military
just
bridge between Djibouti and Aden.
Yeah. Matt Duss, if you can give us final remarks, because without holding Israel accountable for the death of 67,000 Palestinians who've been killed and some 170,000 apparently injured, they are getting away with it. Rights groups such as B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights Israel and a UN Human Rights Commission of Inquiry have said the same thing, that this is genocide. Now, Yair Lapid, the opposition leader, has called all of this propaganda. He said there's no genocide, there's no intentional starvation. And do you think that it's correct that you could have a peace agreement without holding either side responsible for the kind of, both the October 7 attack and the 2 years of, the genocide in Gaza?
I think there will need to be some kind of accountability, some kind of reckoning, not just for the war on Gaza, but also, as you said, for October 7, and frankly, for the decades of occupation and repression and violence that took place before. We can find examples of this in the past, whether, post-apartheid South Africa, other conflict situations. It will be very difficult, but I do think, we don't have to, reinvent the wheel here. There is, good data and good information and good experiences in the past that show that this is part of a process of justice and reckoning that is really necessary for a durable peace. Not just signatures on a piece of paper, but real durable peace leading to longer term coexistence. Unfortunately, I don't think this will happen without really strong leadership from the United States, and that's not going to be coming from the Trump administration. I do have some hope that potentially a next administration, a Democratic administration, could play a more constructive role given some of the shifts that we have seen in the Democratic base among Democratic leaders. So, I mean, so support for international bodies such as the ICC, making clear this is not just accountability for one side, this is accountability for all sides, frankly, including the United States. The Biden administration and the Trump administration have also played roles in facilitating what as you noted, has been termed a genocide by a lot of leading experts and scholars and organizations. But I do think if we're going to even move in that direction, we will need to see a new kind of leadership from the United States that once again decides to take international law seriously, that decides to take accountability seriously. Unfortunately, we do not have that leadership right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matt Duss. This was very interesting. Yeah. If I can come back to you, Professor, for concluding remarks, and you, Dr. Waeil Awwad, at the end. There is the right wing within Israel. I mean, this Itamar Ben-Gvir, as you said, he's described this trash the peace agreement as a national defeat, a disgrace. And there are people within Netanyahu's party who are calling for they're calling the people of Gaza neo-Nazis, and so within Israel, are these views echoed and shared by the common people, or do you feel that there is a group now that's a loud voice within Israel that wants peace? Professor.
Okay, Neena, I think that will remain a major challenge within the Israeli society. We already have seen a lot of divisions within Israel. But again, I think so. Dr. Awad also mentioned about this element in his deliberation a little earlier. This is, in this particular 2 years conflict, the right wing political parties have really got a chance to put forward the agenda of greater Israel, from east to the west, and capture whatever they could, or the Israel concept. They have this, the Zionism, of course, has this concept, something called the conquest for land. And now you declare ownership of wherever you can. So this was one major uh, advantage for the right-wing groups that are part of the coalition, and we all know that this is the most conservative coalition Israel has ever had in the recent in the history. But then, due to its own predicaments, they have to agree to some of this peace plan that has come about.
But within Israel, there were huge protests
Yes,
against.
yes. Even during the celebrations, in the last 2 3 days, when the Israelis go to know that the peace agreement is about to be achieved, there are lots of protests. At the same time, there are celebrations within in Tel Aviv or in other parts. In
So
other parts.
basically, the point is that there is a body of opinion within
Right.
Israel that is as much anti-war as it is
Exactly.
pro.
Exactly. So we will need to, I think we would need to take some time to see whether those forces will really become a strong force inside Israel, or will they be again sidelined by the right wingers? So
Hmm, very interesting.
you have on one side very strong forces coming from the right wing, or people who support the government, and at the same time you also have those section of the society that have been really anti-war.
Hmm.
So I think we should give ourselves some time to see,
See whether
because
it comes to fruition.
elections are coming up next year
Yes.
in Israel. So I think that will give us a picture whether it's going to be the same old story again, or whether there will be some sort of a reform in the leadership in Israel. That's my opinion.
That's very interesting. Dr. Waeil Awwad, if I can come to you with my final question. Why has the West been so eager to accept this agreement? I mean, Israel is going to be welcomed back into the international community. How will they reconcile that with the plight of the Palestinians? Because, the EU, everyone says, is being sweet talked into reconstruction if it drops sanctions against Israel. And Israel believes that it's got what it's wanted. It's emasculated Hamas. It's going. World opinion is swinging its way. Are people actually glossing over this genocide? I mean, it's very similar to that high hopes that we had during the 90s, during the Oslo Accords. Even at that time, Israelis did not back the two-state solution. One half of Gaza is still under Israeli occupation right now.
I think apart from the humanitarian success of ending this war on Gaza, I can say that the major objective of the American president for this ceasefire is to end the American and the Israelis' international isolation. And that is one of the issue where Israel and the United States has been totally isolated because they violated every part of international law and UN Security Council resolution or UN Charter, name it. And the United States is both the hands of Mr. Trump and Biden are soaked with the innocent Palestinian blood. Let's make it very straightforward. The second part, I think the demonstration, Nina, and the Arab and capital, not in the Arab capital, unfortunately, in the Western capital, have made their public opinion change. And I think the environment currently in favor of a Palestinian state, even countries which has never recognized a Palestinian state, came forward, like the UK, which is responsible for the Palestinian crisis, actually, now is saying that they are recognizing a two-state solution. I think 150 nations have been accepted. What I feel is, and I always stress on this point, the ball is in the Palestinian court. The Palestinian Authority have to show their will to resign and give a young generation at least a glimpse of hope that they can lead, they can make something changes in the future of the Palestinian and to face the challenges of establishing a two-state solution, which is maybe a dream, because for the United States and Israel, they believe might is right. But I think the resilience of the Palestinian, the survival under all this bombardment, more than 200,000-ton bombs have been dropped in Gaza. 95% totally destroyed. I mean, 95% of the population internally displaced. Yet they could stand, they could steadfast this much of atrocities against them. I think it is a clear indication that right is might and not might is right.
No, that's very well put. Thank you very much. Where this leaves India, of course, which has steadily built ties with Israel and attempted to keep lines open with Palestinians, is going to be very interesting to watch, because it also wants to take part in the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. So let's see what happens. Thank you very much, Dr. Waeil Awwad, for coming on the show. Thank you very much, Professor Alvite Ningthoujam. And thank you, Matt Duss, for all your valuable insights. Viewers, please do click on the New Indian Express website and click and share Global Express. Thank you.